With you. Several years ago, my good friend Mike Ferris, who started Homeschool Legal Defense Fund and has done a million other things, president of Patrick Henry College, the founder, and Mike and I go back a long way, pulled me aside. I believe it was another CPAC a long time ago, and we sat for a long time as he gave me a tutorial on the Convention of the States. And through those years, Phyllis Schlafly was also a very good friend. Phyllis didn't think the Convention of the States was a very good idea. So it was a bit of a dilemma for me, and since then a lot of people have approached me about this, and some of you who listen have approached me about it, and I have not covered it, mainly because I didn't know what to think. Two people that I really trust and believe have opposing views, and I'm not a constitutional scholar, so I have stayed quiet on it. But I would have to say the Convention of the States has reached, I think we're in a different place now. And I think it's time for a discussion of that. So Mark Meckler is sitting across from me here. He's the president now of the Convention of the States. He was a co-founder of the Tea Party Patriots and also was the Jude that stepped in when Parler got into all that mess, part of the Parler or Parler?
French would say parlay. We here in America call it parler.
So I've called it both things, and I was never sure what. Anyway, I like parlay better. But so Parler started a social media company, Going Great Guns, and then Dan Bongino was involved in that, my friend Ben. Yep. And then they were sabotaged by forces that I can't describe. And so Mark stepped in to help them pull out of that. So that's who he is and what he's done, at least in part. So, Mark, thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's great to be with you. And weird coincidence, I would say, if it not for God, but I was on a long phone call with Mike Ferris this morning.
Oh, no kidding.
One of my best friends, a guy I consider a brother. And so I was up in my hotel room a little late getting down because we were just chatting and catching up.
Well, I tell you about my bonding with Mike came over the same-sex marriage issue.
Yeah.
When I was president of Concerned Women for America. There were just a few of us in D.C. in the conservative movement who held fast on wanting a real strong amendment, and he was my partner in that, along with Don Wildman and a couple of others, but very few. It's just amazing. There were so few of us that really didn't want to compromise on that. So I'll never forget that.
Thanks for being a warrior, because that was not an easy thing to do.
No, we took some hits, and that's all right, but it was the right thing to do. I think we've seen that now.
Yep.
It was the right thing to do. So, Mark Meckler, let's talk about this Convention of the States. If you asked me to explain it, I couldn't. It's been such a long time. So you need to lay it out for us, as I'm sure you've done how many times?
Yeah, millions.
A million. Okay, the 1,000,001th time that you've told this story. What are you suggesting, and why? What's the need here?
So let's start with the why. Washington, D.C. is out of control. It's been out of control for my entire lifetime, to be fair.
Yes.
But my first vote was for Ronald Reagan. Great hope, right? And the greatest conservative communicator in modern history. And he went to Washington, D.C. He said he was going to shrink the federal government. He put Bill Bennett in place. Bennett's job was to do away with the Department of Education. When Reagan left D.C. after 2 terms, D.C. was bigger. The Department of Education was bigger. And so what that showed me from way back when all the way to now is it really doesn't matter in the sense of growth and size and scope of D.C. who we have in power. D.C. has grown outside the bounds of the Constitution. Electing the right people is not going to fix that. In short, D.C. will never fix itself. So we're incredibly blessed because the founders had this foresight. They knew this was going to happen. They gave us Article 5, and Article 5 is how we amend our Constitution. Specifically and importantly, the second clause of Article 5 says that the states can gather in convention and propose amendments to restrain federal tyranny. Now, how do we know that was the specific purpose? Because we have Madison's notes. And in convention on September 15th, 1787, 2 days before the end of convention, we have Colonel George Mason from Virginia stands, and he says this. He says, "We've made a terrible mistake with the document. We gave the power to Congress to propose amendments, but not the equal power to the people acting through their states." And then he asks a question. He says, "Are we so naive that we believe that a federal government which becomes a tyranny will propose the proper amendments to restrain its own tyranny?" Now, I wish we had video, because I'm pretty sure they laughed. Because what tyrant has ever restrained him or herself, right?
Really? And they knew that. They just come from the hot breath of tyranny, so it was fresh on their mind.
So we know, though, pretty much that they laughed, because Madison's notes say nin com, which is Latin abbreviation for no comment. In other words, not one person objected to what Mason was saying. They argued about everything. but not this. And they unanimously inserted in the Constitution the second clause, which says when 2/3 of states want to call a convention, they can gather in convention, propose amendments, and then send them out for ratification to the states. Specifically, their intent to restrain an out-of-control federal government. So that's where we are today. The government's out of control. D.C. won't restrain itself, and it's going to be up to us, the people.
If it worked just exactly like you would hope, what would they do? What would this amendment be, and what would they do?
So the resolution is what we call a subject matter resolution. There are 3 subject matters open for discussion at convention. This is as designed by our mutual friend Mike Ferris. So first is they can talk about anything that would impose term limits on Congress, which is about an 85% issue. 85% of people believe in that, and federal officials. So think of what we now know as the deep state, right? Staffers and bureaucrats who are currently completely unaccountable to the
and
people.
running the country.
Absolutely.
Setting regulations and rules and punishing people and finding them and arresting them without any laws being passed.
Those people are there for 30 and 40 years. They actually have more power than elected members of Congress. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is anything that would impose fiscal restraints on the federal government. So that would be a balanced budget amendment. It would be taxation caps and spending caps, maybe tied to GDP, population plus inflation. There are ways to limit the growth and the scope financially of the federal government. Again, about an 85% issue among the American public. They'll never do it to themselves. The balanced budget amendment
no
was
kidding.
proposed. They're not going to vote on that and limit their own spending.
They're crazy. And both sides. You know, I was in the elevator with a well-known senator by myself, and we were in D.C. and we were riding up. And he said to me, he said, Sandy, we're out of control. And he said, no one wants to talk about it.
Right.
We're just broke. We're in so much debt.
Right.
We're out of control. And that was a Republican senator, and that was a long, long time ago. And the Republicans are as bad as
Absolutely.
the Democrats.
Yeah, and to add a little context to that, and you brought up Phyllis and her opposition to this, a great woman who I admire deeply. If you think about it, in 1982, we got to 32 states who had proposed going to convention over a balanced budget amendment. So it's 2 states away, right?
Wow.
Phyllis opposed that, as did the AFL-CIO, by the way, and that we had a debt of $4 trillion. That's a fantasy debt now. We wish we were anywhere. We're at over $30 trillion on book. And so the folks who've been fighting against this idea since the 1980s, I mean, I hate to say this, but they're partially responsible personally for this $30 trillion in debt we're facing right now. One last thing is, and I think this is the most important, are what are called scope and jurisdiction restraints on the federal government. And this is where we go back to the enumerated powers. And instead of allowing the federal government to do anything and everything it wants, which is what it does now, it's essentially unrestrained by the courts, we say, no, we're going to go back to enumerated powers. You could literally say things like the federal government may not be involved in education or healthcare or energy or the environment. These are all things, the alphabet soup of agencies that have been allowed by the federal courts with no authority, in my opinion, under the United States Constitution. So we could essentially gut the administrative state, which is one of my biggest goals.
If you did this and you had this convention of the states, would you do all of these amendments? Would it just be one at a time? Each convention would be one amendment, or would it be several amendments?
The convention will address all of those. It takes 26 states to agree on an amendment before that amendment can be sent to the states for ratification. So if we can get 26 states to agree on any one, I think we'll get several out of convention. I don't think it'll be one. I think several will come, probably in each of those subject matter areas.
You actually have several states that have signed on to this, right?
It takes 34 states to call. So far, 19 states have called on, so we're well past the halfway mark. I actually expect to finish this by, say, 2025 is my current goal.
Well, I can see that now there would be more momentum.
Yeah.
There's more of a willingness to listen.
Absolutely.
And an understanding that this is just, they're out of control in every way. Okay, my really crass way of saying it is, actually, Mark, I think if Washington, D.C. would sink to the bottom of the ocean, we would all be better off.
Oh, absolutely.
Not talking about I wish they were dead, just metaphorically.
The city
place
needs to go away.
Needs to go,
Yeah.
and the whole collaboration of it needs to be gone.
I totally agree with
it's
that.
it's horrible. It's become a nightmare for all of us.
And broadly speaking, the American people are with you on that.
Yeah.
And we poll this stuff, and it's literally over 80% of Americans believe, especially the administrative state, is not for the American people. It's against the American people.
You know, I just talked with Congressman Biggs earlier today, and he was telling me I should have known this, but that new reconciliation bill, which is what I think it's the same as the inflation fighting bill that they're talking about, has all of this millions of dollars to hire new IRS agents. And of course, as we're thinking about this, it means they're going to be sent out to harass people like you and me. They're not going to harass, the head of the DNC and various states. It's not going to happen. And that might have sounded radical to some people 5 years ago, but now they know. This is exactly what's going to happen.
I have a very personal interest in that. So back in my days in the Tea Party movement, we actually funded a class action lawsuit against the IRS for the harassment of the Tea Party. Literally the only class action settlement I'm ever aware of. The IRS was forced to pay us $3.7 million, not to me, but to all the groups that were.
I didn't realize that you guys...
Yeah, I went head to head with the IRS. So the idea that they're going to hire 80,000 IRS agents, you're absolutely correct. It's not for general work. It's to harass people like us that oppose the deep state.
And people understand that's true because they see what's happening to the J6ers. Yep. They see that's what's happening to parents at school board meetings. It's in the flavor. So the Congress is getting ready to advance their powers and start to take the money of the people that they oppose politically.
So this is why you and I and the people have to take the power away from D.C.
All right, so
let's do you want me to explain why Phyllis was opposed?
Yes, I would like to know that.
And I think this is important, and I will present their arguments as they do because I think this is important, and you can find those arguments on our website. We're not trying to hide this stuff. So what Phyllis and a lot of people like her say is that if you get into a convention, that there will be what they call a runaway convention.
Yes, that's exactly what she said.
And so what they mean by that, so that we explain it so people understand, is they believe that once you get into convention, the delegates, the commissioners from the states can do anything they want. They're not bound by the resolutions passed by the states because every state is saying we only want to talk about those three things. They will then propose amendments, and their fear is that the left will somehow take over convention and they will propose radical amendments that destroy our rights, say take away our Second Amendment rights, for example.
Right.
So that's the overall framing.
But you're opening a window for it to be misused.
I hear the word Pandora's box used all the time.
Yeah.
So let me explain why that's simply impossible. And then I want to explain where that argument comes from, because that's important for conservatives as well, right? We need to understand the foundation of our arguments.
Absolutely.
So here's why it's not possible. It's math. So it takes 38 states to ratify any amendment that comes out of convention. And while I don't believe, and I can explain why the convention can't get out of control, let's presume for a moment that Phyllis and everybody who makes that argument is correct. By the way, we know the number 6.7% of Republicans oppose this. That's it. It's a small fringe in America. We had Trafalgar polling poll this a couple of weeks ago, so we know the exact numbers. Okay, so if you get something that comes out of convention, let's say, for example, the repeal of the Second Amendment. My mom was a cop. My son's a Marine. We're big gun people. We're going to fight against that. Chuck Cooper, who was the longest-term litigator for the NRA, is on my legal advisory board. So I don't believe Second Amendment's at risk. Let's say I'm wrong about all of that. It comes out of convention. Today, there are 24 states where you can literally carry your handgun in the state capitol. There are 14 states where you can carry a loaded long gun, your AR, across your back and walk into the Capitol and sit in the gallery and watch the proceedings. Okay, now I'm not saying that's a great idea. I'm just saying you can, right? So now in a country like that, explain to me how you can't find 13 states that would vote against the repeal of the Second Amendment, right? And by the way, in order to vote against, and this is an important procedural fact, you do nothing. There's no hearing. They don't have to vote against it. They just don't take it up. And so that's the easy thing for a state legislature to do. So the idea that you could get 38 states to ratify anything, and I'm going to put this out to your audience. I've done this to millions of people. My email is mmeckler@cosaction.com. If you're worried about this, I understand that. Send me the amendment you're worried about in just layperson's terms. You don't need to be a legal drafter. And then list me the 38 states that will ratify it. I've made that offer to many, many, many millions of people. Beck, Levin, Hannity, Shapiro, all those shows. I've not gotten, Sandy, an email in 9 years because it's not possible.
Is Mark Levin on?
Oh yeah,
Convention of States?
he's one of the endorsers. He wrote the book Liberty Amendments, which lays this out better than
I
anybody
didn't
else.
even know that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Mark well. I didn't know that book was about that.
Yeah, and so if you look, and this is another place to go, is if you look at who's opposed and who's in favor, right? So if you look in America today, every single leftist group in America that's a known named leftist group signed a press release Good Friday 5 years ago against Convention of States. It was led by Common Cause and Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. You know who those guys are, right? Those are Soros front groups.
Right. Yes.
It's Planned Parenthood, it's La Raza, it's MoveOn.org, it's Daily Cause.
Wow.
Hillary Clinton spoke out against us personally.
Oh, boy.
So it's I hate to be a little bit crass, every baby-killing, America-hating, Marxist, communist group in America signed against this.
I remember with the Equal Rights Amendment that there was a time limit from the time
7
you start
years.
this process,
Yeah.
7 years. So how long have you guys been doing this?
So there's no time limit for getting into convention. We've been at it 9 years now. A big chunk of my life spent on this, but no time limit for getting into convention.
Oh, I see.
The time limit is if the convention proposes an amendment, how long do the states have to ratify?
Okay. So this is the long game.
This is the long game, absolutely. But let me add, we've built the largest grassroots army in America, 5.2 million people. They're engaged in elections. We'll be involved in one way or another in over 450 state-level elections in this cycle. Last cycle, it was 250. For example, our grassroots just were involved in the Ohio primary, 7 races. They won 6. There's an army on the ground out there. They donate their money. They walk, they knock, they make the calls. They're doing the hard political work. They're engaged in the fight for life, in the legislature's Second Amendment rights. Anything conservative, Convention of States activists are involved in.
Well, they must be because to have 19 states. That's very impressive, Mark. So tell me who your big opponents are now. Phyllis is no longer with us.
So it's really everybody on the left.
Oh, yes.
And then there are 2 others, and I would say 3. One of them will be a little bit personal to you. So it's Eagle Forum is still opposed. And I would say that's waning in the sense that it was really the people who've been around the longest who are, at this point, they're going home to the father, a lot of those folks. And so we're seeing that weaken a little bit. It's the John Birch Society. And then some occasionally concerned women we run up against.
Well,
and I saw that actually change. I know you obviously.
I'm no longer there.
No, but I know that's where you come from.
Yeah.
I love Penny.
Well, that was before. This started.
No.
After I left.
Oh,
long
yeah,
time
way
after.
after.
I left.
So, and they originally were not opposed. They were neutral on it, kind of like you said. We got friends on both sides. And when Eagle Forum kind of blew up, as happened over the last couple of years after Phyllis's passing, unfortunately, I think there was kind of a jockeying for. There was a lot of the membership and. If you're going to get that membership, you needed to be opposed to COS. That's my guess of where it came from, because Mike and Penny are also friends. And so there was kind of a détente with us in the beginning. And they've come out more, not big, it's not a big push, but we go up against them in the legislature.
I've got a guess. I'm guessing establishment Republicans are not down with this.
No, absolutely not.
Yes,
they don't like it at all.
we just figured out why Concerned Women for America is not endorsing.
That's good.
So I just thought I'd inform you.
They don't like it at all because they don't want the power to be taken away from D.C.
Yeah, so that would mean a lot of other conservative organizations would do. I won't go down the list, but let me just say
we're on the same page.
There were very few of us who were fighting against the establishment.
Yeah,
that I was at CWA and continue to do.
Yeah,
because I think that they're some of our worst enemies.
You
honestly.
and me both.
Well, Mark, if people want more information, what can they do? What do you need them to do?
Go to conventionofstates.com and sign up. 1, sign the petition. That goes to your state legislators and lets them know you're in favor. And then 2, and this is most important to me, Sandy, it's what you've been doing your whole life, actually get on the playing field. Click on the Take Action tab and volunteer and get involved. It's not enough to just sign a petition. I appreciate people who do, but the country's at stake. And so when they do that, by the way, they're going to join Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, Ben Shapiro, Steve Deace, everybody that they know as fighters for liberty. Every nationally known living conservative who's commented on this is in favor.
Well, I'm going to get off the bench. I mean, I appreciate you. I appreciate having this time with you, Mark, because I cover so many issues. It's like my brain can only absorb
I don't know how you do
so
it,
much
Sandy.
information.
It's impressive.
So I just kind of avoided this
Yeah.
because of that conflict.
Yep.
And so this is very clear, and I understand, and I'm all in.
Well, God
okay?
bless you. Thanks for
Okay?
being in the fight.
So
I
you
appreciate
won
you.
me over.
I love it.
So
I appreciate
and
it.
a lot of my listeners will be happy too. So,
Good. Well, thank
all
you,
right,
Sandy.
Mark. God
Great
bless
being
you,
with
and
you.
thank
God
you.
bless you, too.
Thank you so very much. All right, Sandy Rios in the morning on AFR Talk.
I just couldn't sit by anymore and do nothing.
I always said I hated politics, but I found out that you can't really change things if you don't get involved.
What we're looking for is somebody that has the heart and wants to help save their country.
It's just the nicest group of people that I've ever worked with.